Welcome to Faith Works Live. Here's your host, Rebecca Haney.
It's a good day to be with you. This is Faith Works Live. Rebecca's my name, and I'm just truly honored that you choose to spend this moment of your time. Everybody's so busy that it's great to spend this time with you, this tiny little slice of eternity. We get to focus on what it looks like to live out our faith in this crazy old mixed up Romans 1 world. And it's for such a time as this that God has put you here. It's not an accident. And one thing that just to dive right into the deep end off the bat, God's timing is always the best. So if he's making you wait on something right now, it's because he's making you ready for whatever he has to come. So I've learned that waiting time is not wasted time. And just hopefully that gives you that little pick-me-up that it did to me when we were thinking about it this morning. Ron Carlson, our excellent producer in studio, shout out to Ron. And we're talking about, at least for me at my house, I don't know, maybe you guys have gotten back into the back-to-school swing of things. Homeschooling is always kind of its own fun adventure. But, we've also decided to dual enroll a couple of our students this year, and that's led to all kinds of really interesting conversations. And some of them, maybe, if you're dealing with these at your house too, have to do with health and healthcare and government control of our bodies and immunizations and just all kinds of fun vocabulary words that YouTube is about to censor. So let's see if I could talk around this subject and you can still see it. Then you're one of the lucky ones. You're one of the few and the proud. I love to have conversations about empowering parents, empowering everyone, of course, but especially empowering parents to choose what is best for their families. And if you've been around for, I don't know, maybe the last 4 or 5 years, it does seem like we have to be super informed. I'll put it that way. We are in charge of our health and making the best possible decisions for our families, not the government. And so to empower everyday citizens and everyday Iowans, especially, shout out to my Iowans, to make good choices and to be able to exercise the freedom that is their God-given right. Our pal and friend of the show, Gabby Fistler, joins us yet again. Gabby, it's been too long. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me back. I am super excited to be here again and just share about Informed Choice Iowa and what we have going on and hopefully empower some more people to take those parental rights back.
Yeah, well, and that's the aim of the game. And it doesn't seem like that long ago when we were all asking some very important and very pressing questions. We were placed in situations about 4 years ago, give or take. And many of us have had to do an awful lot of both soul searching and values defining when it comes to that. Iowa has now the reputation, because we got to see up close and personal how states like Iowa were different than states like Illinois or Minnesota or Ohio or however, wherever you might live and you're listening to this. And our family chose, for the interests of personal freedom, as well as a few other things, to move back to Iowa from Minnesota, partially because we knew we'd have some more freedom and more choices. And that was very important to us. And I think the differences have only gotten more stark since then. But you mentioned being based in Iowa, so you were speaking in Minnesota, and you were talking about some of that perception, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Iowa is, the gold standard quite yet, or that there isn't more work to do. So let's talk a little bit about the differences that you've been experiencing or that you've been hearing about in some of those states and the direction that we hope that Iowa goes, and some ways that people can participate as well.
Yeah, so ICI has a few different initiatives as an organization. One is education, and part of that, we like to do a conference every year. So we do have our 6th annual conference happening Saturday, October 19th. So if you have not purchased a ticket already, I highly encourage you to go do so. There'll be $75 until the day of the conference. And with that education, we also travel to other venues as well. So we were a vendor at a conference in Minnesota, and so many people said, "Oh, I wish I could move to Iowa." And you kind of take for granted sometimes what you do have when you live in it. And we were talking to them about some of the legislative piece that we do as an organization as well, and how we go to the Capitol every year, sometimes a couple times a year, and do lobby days. We're down there more frequently, but we had more legislators thank us for coming and doing what we do than tell us to get out of the Capitol this last year.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
It's trending in the right direction. That's good.
Yeah, Minnesota, not so much. They're like, yeah, we don't get that here. We were talking about how we had some really good wins. Even though we didn't get a bill passed last year, we we were one vote away from going to the governor's desk, and they're like, that's not even possible. Like, we have some people that are strong voices, but with it being such a Democratic-led state, none of those bills go anywhere. And so you have to kind of look at the silver lining of it sometimes. So, you started beautifully with such a time as this, and waiting is, how did you say that? Waiting is?
Waiting time is never wasted time.
Yes. And so we had a bill that was one vote away from going to the governor's desk last year to make exemptions be notified properly. So going to school, medical and religious exemptions are allowed in Iowa, but some schools don't disclose the law. So we made this silly little change to Iowa code that says that schools have to disclose the law. You would think that would be a given.
So you just have to inform people that exemptions are an option
Yes.
for them, and some schools currently don't do that. So this would require them to just inform everybody that this is a possibility for them.
Yeah, disclose the law.
That's it.
That is
Seems
all it was.
Simple enough, straightforward. Yeah.
Should be, yes. So it ended up being actually bipartisan in the House. So I think once people understood what the bill was, we weren't making the schools put forth any more effort. We weren't making them write, books to send home to parents to inform them of the, I'm going to say, lack of safety studies on vaccines, because there really isn't a good safety study. We just said the same notification you send out to parents that says you're required to get XYZ, you also need to say a religious or medical exemption is allowed. Go to this website to get it. So very simple.
Like one email.
And it's the email they already sent.
Right.
Just add a line to it.
Yeah.
Don't tell parents that no shots, no school. Like, that's just, it's very hard to continue to trust the school when they lie to you like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the legislators were seeing that, why aren't we telling parents what actually is the law? And so with that waiting, we have now been able to continue to work with Senator Green and Health and Human Services and the Department of Public Education to educate them on the law and what parents are doing. So, silver lining to COVID, more parents were aware of vaccines, and that there are exemptions and that you can say no. They were put in those situations, and their eyes were open to, like, some of these Can I keep saying that? Should I not?
Why not? I mean, we've already been censored.
I'll say
Hi,
jabs.
everyone. At this point, I mean, if they're going to bleep us, it's just like, let's go down swinging, Gabby. Let's do it.
I can say jabs. That's my normal
Sure.
go-to.
Okay, sounds good.
So, when you look at the Hep B, that was only studied for 5 days, and there was no blind placebo.
How is that possible?
Right?
How is that like, we give that to baby? I mean, not to my babies, not anymore. But I mean, they push that on newborn children.
Yes. And it was originally designed for people that were doing drugs or having sexual relations that contract Hep B. Well, they invested so much money into this, they weren't getting their receivables back. And so they said, well, once we put on the childhood schedule, now every baby can get it their first day of life. And
That's
what
insane.
child is doing drugs and having sexual relations on day one?
Yeah. I was almost insulted when the nurses started talking about that for my babies. And I was like, was there something on my test? What on earth? That I need to know about this. And they're like, oh no, we just give it to all the babies. Like, why? What on earth? What possible logical reason could there be other than just making sure they get it in their system? And that means, correct me if I'm wrong, that means that the hospitals get paid, right?
Oh, yes, very much so. Yeah.
So could there be I'm not saying that's the only reason, could there though be a fiduciary incentive? Most definitely.
Yes, there definitely is. And once that jab is on the childhood schedule, they're exempt from liability. So not only are the safety studies 5 days, they're monitoring them after that, there's no placebo. So the person in the control group is actually getting a different variety of the same jab. So that way their reactions aren't as severe from a blind saline placebo.
Okay.
So there's no real safety studies done with these. It was a very short study that was done. It's on the schedule, so now they can give it to whoever, and there's no liability for them. And then you have a school saying you have to do it. And then you have doctor's offices, even when you're a new mom, that will say that also. Well, you need to have shots for your kids to go to school, which they are a day old. No one is thinking about them going to kindergarten or preschool yet. So there's a lot of things.
So even just saying
that.
things like wait and see.
Yeah.
I want to wait and think about it. I want to do my research. I've actually seen that. I remember it's been maybe a couple years ago now, but I talked with Ben Tapper, and he said the phrase "do your own research" became considered a threat to public health. And I was that's really interesting. So we're not even independent thought and being able to think for yourselves, to research for yourselves, to ask questions of your own doctors and say, okay, what's best for me in my situation? That became anathema to the top-down voices, to the experts that were telling us we just have to trust the science. I don't know about you, but if someone tells me to trust the science, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna research it then.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do some experiments. Like, let's figure out where the data drive us. And they're like, no, just trust us. That's what that means, is trust only our science, only what we allow you to know. And I'm afraid that's just not good enough for me. I've always been a bit of a rebel that way. Like, I really want to know what's going into my body, but especially to my kids' bodies. Yeah. And I think I've talked to you about this before, Gabby. This is kind of a new field for me. It's a new horizon, so to speak. When I became a mom, I mean, my first instinct was, okay, they're the health experts. I talk to my doctor, and if they tell me that this is necessary, especially if it's been approved, you assume you trust the voice of authority, because I'm not a medical authority. But the more and more I started waking up to some of these different things, I realized God gave me control of my health, and he entrusted that to me. So I need to be wise about how I handle that. And I want to find ways to work within his design. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially for Christians. I can take the advice of people who are trained in medicine. Absolutely. I admire their dedication and their study and all of those things, but that doesn't mean they're infallible. And frankly, I've seen an awful lot of questionable judgment, and when I dare speak up and ask those questions and I get shut down, that makes me less inclined to trust you, not more, because then it's not about what's best for me and my health. It's about some other motivation, and that my spidey sense starts to tingle at that point. No, I don't know that this is all about health. And there's a lot, I mean, just put simply and concisely, there's a lot of reason to distrust the typical medical wisdom that's been coming out over the last several years now. I wasn't always this radical. I got radicalized by my grocery bill and by the COVID nonsense. Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm over here being like, be a homesteader, be a homeschooler. Like, this is what they've done to me. I didn't ask to be this way.
Do you have chickens yet?
This is their fault. Our city won't let us do chickens.
Oh, no.
So that's a whole nother, fight the town hall local fight. But yeah,
her chickens are the gateway drug to homesteading.
Chickens are the gateway drug,
yes.
They're not allowed. There's a whole list of farm animals that are not allowed in city limits, and chickens are one of them. Oh, man. I'll tell you about the local Karens sometime. But I love my city. I love my town. But come on, y'all. Free the chicken. Free the coop. Free the coop. Oh, I'm going to get in so much trouble this time. Okay, so when people go to Informed Choice Iowa, let's give the website again, because you've got a conference coming up. There's a good ways for people to get involved. That would be a good opportunity to hang out with crazy people like me. Yeah. So how people can get involved, let's drop that one more time. Yes. And then talk about some of the recommendations that you're making for Iowa legislation this next time around.
Yeah, so our conference is Saturday, October 19th. If you have attended before, we are switching the venue up. We're going to Franklin Junior High, or the Franklin Center, so just right here off Merle Hay a little bit. And you can go to our website, informedchoiceiowa.com, and we have a banner. Also follow us on Facebook or Instagram, and make sure you sign up for our newsletter when you do go to our website, because just like this podcast, we get a little censored sometimes too. Our topic is not one that people, I say they want you to hear about. So that is definitely a great place to go. You mentioned Ben Tapper. He's going to be our MC this year.
Awesome.
So he is driving up from Omaha.
He's one of the good ones. I really like him.
You know, when you make the disinformation dozen, that you should listen to them. Like when they say, don't listen to this group, that's probably who you should listen to.
Exactly. Contrarians unite.
Yes.
He's a good guy.
Oh, he's so great. Yeah. So he spoke at our conference a couple years ago, and we've asked him to come back and MC, and he was very glad to do so. And then we are having Peter McCullough as our keynote. So he's coming and speaking at the conference as well. And, you were talking about...
Speaking of censored people.
Yeah, right.
He's probably right up there at the top, isn't he? So if people aren't familiar with that name, what's his kind of claim to fame?
Yeah, so he is a very well researched doctor. So he has cited many articles, he's published many articles. He is like the heart doctor of all heart doctors. And he has fought to keep his license because he spoke out about COVID. He spoke out about the jab, he spoke out about medications that can help with that as well. And so he has his wellness alternatives,
Yeah.
yes, that went against the medical establishment. And so he has been heavily censored. They have tried to run his name through the mud. And he is now looking into the childhood jabs as well. And so he's realizing that, okay, if this one is bad, what about the others that they're doing? And, you know,
It is sort of that gateway, isn't it?
It very
if you
much
start
is.
asking questions, then it's kind of like opening that Pandora's box.
Oh, yeah.
Which sort of explains, to take the other side, why you don't want people doing your own research, because then they start asking all kinds of uncomfortable questions, and it can lead you down quite a rabbit trail for a while, and it can start again. You start to make whole different decisions, far different decisions, and you start realizing how much agency you actually have, and I would say how much responsibility as a Christian, as a mom, for my own family, which is one of the biggest motivators for me, is that I can't just say, well, I'm just going to let the doctors do whatever they tell me is right. I don't think that's responsible. I think I have to do what's best for my body and for my family, to try to raise them up as best I can to be healthy and smart and free and just all the things that God calls his people to do to raise up our children well. And I don't think it's enough anymore to just trust the experts in authority when it's pretty clear they're coming at things from other motivations. And again, not to every single individual has any negative motivations. I'm not even sure that most of the people in the wider medical profession or medical community have even thought too hard about it. I think by the time, and having spoken to many respected doctors, many of them believe they're doing the absolute best that they can to keep people healthy and well, and they dedicate their time to this. So I'm not just trying to trash the whole medical field.
Completely.
But I do think that there's a difference between the physicians and nurses and the medical practitioners that we have, and their interest in just keeping people healthy and serving their communities. That's wonderful, and it deserves to be honored. But I also think there's a whole industry of pharmaceutical companies and other interests related to that add a whole different layer to this discussion. And is that a good distinction to make, do you think? Because I believe in medical care and treating ourselves well and using the medical knowledge that God has given us and skills and doctors and surgeons, and that's all praiseworthy and wonderful. But I just think that we've made such an industry. There's so much money involved now in just frankly selling people drugs.
Yeah, sick care. It's not health care, it's sick care. Because if you're healthy...
That's a much shorter way to put it. I like that.
If you're healthy, you're not profitable. They can't keep giving you more prescriptions. And, God didn't design us deficient in 72 injections. And
mic drop. I like that.
Yeah. And a lot of, the pharmaceuticals that are out there are derived from natural resources, but you can't patent those. And so they have to make them, in the lab. So then they can put a patent on it and make money off of it.
Yeah.
So I wholeheartedly agree with you. I believe there are a ton of people that go into being a nurse or a doctor with just the desire to help people. And then they get into that industry. And, I've talked to many nurses, and there's a lot of them that are starting to come to our conference as well. In fact, we recently just shared a post on our Facebook page that was from a nurse that was saying, I'm not doing it anymore. Like, I've seen the kids get sick after they've gotten their shots. But they aren't taught about it. Someone from the pharmaceutical company comes in and says, here's the schedule, memorize it and give it. And they don't teach nutrition in school. And so it would be very hard to invest as much money as they do into their career to learn what they learned, and then to have some mom just come in that has never went a day to medical school in her life and start questioning everything that you believe in.
Right.
And I don't think that they do it intentionally. There are obviously some. If you Google Stanley Plotkins, he knows he's killing babies. He knows that there's aborted fetal cells in some of these. And he has straight up said, I have no problem going to hell.
Wow.
So there definitely is an evil agenda with it. I do not think that most people do. I just don't think that they have took a pause to ask the right questions.
Well, what are some of those questions then? Because we were talking a bit about back to school and some of the, that's just one opportunity, one occasion. And I will say, as somebody that's kind of outside the system anyway, because I'm homeschooling, I'm like, I don't really care what their opinion is. You can't, what can man do to me? Like, let's just have fun with this. You can try to tell me what to do, but I mean, good luck. But that being said, there's a lot of people that's a big motivator for them. If you hear, well, in order to go to school, your kid has to have these injections. And in order to go now to college, so now it's even beyond, there's a lot of people that choose to homeschool K through 12, but then still want to pursue higher education. Example, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an esteemed profession, that's great. You need higher education. And they're still pressuring, even now young adults, because that's what this is at the college age. They're pressuring them because you're in that communal living situation. They say that they now have the right to determine what chemicals you're putting in your body. So what are some of those questions that parents can ask or that young adults can start to ask? And what are some of their rights that maybe they're not being informed about?
Yeah. So I would start with, like, if you have a child that is about to go to college, talk to them about why you are doing what you're doing. Because once they get to school, they're 18 and the college is going to say, your parents can't fill out this form. You need to do this. And just like being a first-time mom, that is a lot of pressure of, well, I don't know. I mean, my daughter is 7 and she probably gets exposed to it a lot more than most kids because of being involved in the advocacy of it.
Sure.
But she knows that she doesn't get shots and she's never had an antibiotic and we go to the chiropractor. And so making sure that they understand the why is really important. So when they do go off to school, definitely knowing what your state's laws are. So every state has a medical exemption. California is probably the hardest one to actually get one. And I believe it's their public health board determines if the medical exemption is reliable or not. Not the doctor saying this person has already had a severe reaction.
Yeah.
It's up to a different group of governmental employees to determine if it's valid or not. There's only, I think, 3 or 4 states left in the nation that don't have a religious exemption. Mississippi was just overturned. They got that law passed.
Okay.
Here in Iowa, we do have a medical and religious exemption. And so as a parent going into that doctor's office, I guess, ask them what is in it. Ask them for the full insert because it is this huge piece of paper. Look at section, I think 13.1 has all of the ingredients in it, and all of them have a black box warning that they can cause death. Ask them, if my child has a reaction, what do I do? Who is liable for that?
Yeah.
Because there's no one. The hospital's not liable. The person giving the injection's not liable. The pharmaceutical company's not liable. There is a separate court that was created in 1986 that you have to go through. It has paid out over $5 billion, and it is extremely hard to even file a claim, but yet they've paid out that much money. So safe and effective and injuries are rare is not at all applicable.
Wow. And nobody even knows to ask those questions for the most part. I mean, it's starting to become more popular and more prevalent to at least ask the questions. But if you don't know and you have kind of this knee-jerk reaction like, maybe I'm skeptical, and that skepticism is met with essentially condescension or an overwhelming sloganeering is kind of what I've noticed is that every doctor, when you ask these questions, will say the same thing. They'll say safe and effective, like you're talking about. If you ask about natural immunity, they'll say, well, vaccine immunity is more robust.
Yeah.
It's more robust. And I'll say, based on what? And they say the studies. So I'm like, can I see those studies? And they say, we just know it's more robust.
we weren't taught to answer that question.
Top of the script, repeat. Yeah. And if you start asking those enough, because I was, pregnant 3 times during COVID. Like
oh man,
figured all of this out. And I started asking and started noticing a pattern.
Yeah.
And you never have to be rude. You never have to be combative with people. But I think you do have to be your own advocate. And that's another way to look at it. You have to be your child's advocate. And I'm noticing, not to dovetail too much into other areas, but I'm noticing an increasing distancing effect not distancing, dividing. There's a dividing effect that is happening by certain powers that be that seek to separate kids from their parents.
Yes, very
in
much
many,
so.
many ways. So when you start having, nowadays, they'll have kids that are in middle school, kids that are tweens. They'll start talking with them about things like the HPV vaccine, which is, if you start looking at that, the side effects of that and the notorious injuries that have resulted, in particular in young women, from some of those vaccines in particular. That's super scary. That should be enough. That started making me question things, even when I thought, okay, some of this is it must be fine because they're doing it with everybody,
Right.
but I don't see any reason that we need to talk about sexually transmitted diseases with like my 9-year-olds. Let's not do that. And the division that happens now is that parents are seeking to, sorry, not parents, that doctors, nurses, school officials are seeking to separate the kids and talk to them about it on their own and say, well, we can do this and your parents don't need to know. That is actually happening. And that's happening in terms of society. It's happening in terms of confusion about gender and identity and all of those discussions. It's happening in terms of politics and political ideology in the classrooms.
Yep.
And I see a variation of that happening in the medical community as well. And I can't help but think that there's this whole, if you do not respect the family unit, if you don't respect the rights and the authority of parents to determine what's best for their children, and the vast, vast, vast majority of parents, that's absolutely correct. And there shouldn't be like a one minor exception that's out there where abuse might be taking place. That does not disprove the rule. And that doesn't undermine 99.9% of parents who are just trying to do what's right by their child and who are experts in their child, by the way. And I don't know, I think tying this into parental rights and understanding what your rights and responsibilities are as a parent is fundamental to this whole discussion. It's not about whether or not you disagree about this, medical practice or this path, whatever you determine is right for your child. The point is, it's in your hands. It's not in the hands of the government. It's not in the hands of unelected officials that are there telling you what you need to inject, what chemicals you need to put into your child. It has to be God gave us our children. He gave them to us, to the parents, to the families, not to the government. And that is so basic to me. It just has to be reset over and over and over again, just for the people in the back, just in case we're not clear. God gave children to parents and not government. He made us into families first. That's the initial unit of government. And I'm suspicious, flat out, of any force that's attempting to undermine that or to divide parents from their children. I don't see any good that comes from that.
Yep, I have a shirt that says I don't co-parent with the government.
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah. And
I don't know how we got twisted about that or how we became cowed into accepting that. I don't know. I mean, hopefully, from your vantage point, are you seeing that more people are kind of reasserting that, no, this is actually my God-given authority and this is my natural right to raise my children? Or is the government still being successful? And is Big Pharma, those voices, are they still successful in what I say is a fear campaign against parents to cow them into accepting whatever they're told?
I think that more people are waking up to it. I know when I first had my daughter 7 years ago, I was told that I'm an awful mother. I'm going to kill my daughter. All of the things.
Yeah.
And she did get a couple of vaccines at first because I didn't know any different. My mom had talked to me about it, but I was in that boat of, why would my doctor tell me to do something that is going to harm my child?
Sure.
And I was home that week after we had her. And back to being in the hospital, I had to have an emergency C-section. So I was just drugged to the nines. And they said, hey, we really need you to sign these papers. I had no idea what I was signing. That was not informed consent whatsoever at all. But parents are asking questions now. That's something that we have struggled with as an organization, is how do we reach the people that don't know? They're not following our Facebook page. They're not following us online. But going to the Capitol, going to different events is how people learn more. Having these conversations like this,
Sure.
Like back to the HPV one, in Iowa, minors can consent to that without parents' approval because it's preventing a sexually transmitted disease. So we did get it changed that schools no longer by law have to talk about it. Because a couple of years ago when they were in health class, schools had to talk about that jab and how it can prevent cervical cancer, which if you only have sons, that should be like a red flag at first. Why am I giving it to my son that does not have a cervix? So, but
quick biology lesson for everyone, in case you're confused. Only women have certain, like men and women are, okay, back up. Men and women are different. Boys and girls are different.
Yes.
Because we have to clarify that now,
Yes,
too.
yes.
But yes, carry on. You're
Yes.
correct.
So we actually ran a bill last year to try and get that removed. And I was very surprised with the people that were coming after us. The hospital lobby and the insurance lobby did not want that removed because, well, kids make decisions and they might not want to tell their parents that they're sexually active. And so by them being able to consent to this, it is safer for the child because the parent could kick them out of the house for having sex before the parents want them to. So we are allowing a child to make a decision because you're scared of bad parenting. Mm-hmm. Like, again they're
look at the
taking
logic.
that voice away
Yeah.
from the parent. No, it's my child. It is my decision what I want to inject in their bodies.
Yeah.
And it's not aborted fetal cells. It's not dog kidneys. It's not formaldehyde. It's not aluminum. I mean, the list goes on of, I wouldn't eat those things or buy food that has it in it, but I'm going to put it right into their bloodstream. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's hard when you are a new parent because you just don't know. And that's where the conference is so great to come to. Mm-hmm. And this year we're switching things up. Before we used to really focus on bringing in those top experts and talking about, the history of, the Rockefellers and how they started the medical industrial complex and bringing in, Pierre Corey and Scott Atlas and Ben Tapper and, all these really big doctors that can give you all this information, which is great. And it empowers you because once you could go into any doctor's office and no is my decision. Mm-hmm. First, you probably aren't even going to go into those doctor's offices anymore. And luckily, a lot of doctors and nurses have woke up and there is a really great movement of an alternative practice. There's holistic doctors out there that are allowing you to go in that can still prescribe you medications if you do, want an antibiotic or a different prescription, but they're not going to force you to take those jabs.
Yeah, which I think is critical as a part of this conversation, because if we, tell everybody information and they're like, okay, well, not doing that. It's like a whole road of, I don't know if you remember that little picture book of the train, Toodles the train or something like that. Uh-huh. And he would go off the track. And the only way to get him back on the track was they waved red flags everywhere that wasn't on the track. So
well, if that's not a metaphor for life.
The only green flag was right on the track. And so he knew that if he hopped off, he would get a red flag. And so he had to get back on the track. Oh. Anyway, I digress because I love children's books. But that's what it feels like as I'm starting to make medical decisions in an awareness of concerns that I have about standard practice and not being able to ask the questions. My concern is if it's just one big red flag and people are like, well, I'm too scared to go to the doctor's office. I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to get involved in this whole system. But I'm going to need healthcare. I'm going to need to be proactive about health. What can we do instead? Yep. So how would you recommend people go? And I don't know if this is within the purview of ICI, but what are some good resources for people who are thinking, what do I do instead? What are some places for holistic care or other things, alternatives?
Yeah, so that is a conversation we have all been having, and that's why our theme for this year's conference is building informed communities. So instead of bringing these big names from all over the country that, it's fun to have your picture with them. It's great to hear them talk in person when you see them on podcasts and TV.
Sure.
But what happens if you leave and your child gets a cold? Mm-hmm. What happens if they did have a reaction to a medication or a jab? Where do I go? And so we are bringing the doctors to you, essentially, at this conference. So we have Dr. Sarah Outlaw speaking. She is a chiropractor with the Natural Health Center of Des Moines. She's originally from New Jersey, and she's talking about the medical system is failing our kids and how to empower moms. And so the thing we're asking each of our speakers to do is, what are 2 or 3 things that you would recommend we have in our medicine cabinet?
Yeah, I like that.
So that way, when you leave, you can go get those. You don't need a prescription for them. And if you see that your child is starting to get a fever, don't go get the Tylenol to take that fever down. The fevers are good. They're your body healing. So here is something to maybe just help them stay hydrated while they're going through the fever and their body's fighting off the infection. Yeah. Here is a homeopathic remedy that you can do if they get a bug bite and they're really itchy, or they have an allergic reaction, or they have allergies, which surprisingly mine sound a lot better than what they feel like right now.
But what are natural things to do for allergies?
Oh yeah, I was taking some homeopathy on the way down to to help, dry up my snotty nose, but I'm not going to take an over-the-counter that isn't going to help heal the actual problem.
Yeah.
And, just what are some of those cough syrups that are clean that can help coat the throat and not just mask it? So she's one of our speakers. We also have Dr. Kevin Miller, who's also a chiropractor here in the metro area at Truth Chiropractic, and he's talking about the path of a vaccine. And so he's going to speak on what happens when it does enter your body. He's going to focus a little bit more on the COVID shot because that one is so different than any other jab that has been out there with the mRNA technology that's in it. A lot of the childhood jabs can be detoxed. Last year we had Jody Meshik speak, and her son had a severe case of autism after getting one of his routine injections, and she was able to reverse it. And her go-to was camel's milk.
Okay, back up. What is that? That's a thing?
It's technically illegal to buy in the U.S.
Okay.
But there are a couple companies that know how powerful it is and how healing it is that there are ways to find it. I think if you go to like camelmilkinstitute.com, don't quote me on that. It's something along those lines. It just takes a little bit. And so that's what helped us reform kind of the theme of the conference because we had so many moms go, I had no idea that this was a way to help heal my child.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we want to bring all of those ideas to the table this year. So yeah, camel's milk. It's
wow. So do your research on camel's milk. Disclaimer: we're not giving medical advice to anyone, but I'm just saying I had no idea that was a thing. So apparently there is an anecdotal connection in this woman's story. Check it out. I'm going to check it out. Myself.
She has a book too. So check out Jody
Excellent.
Meshik. You can read her book, Reversing
cool.
Autism. And it was just so powerful to see a mom on stage that has done her research that did not say my child, she just didn't take that this is how my child's life is always going to be.
Yeah.
She went out and she found a way to make him better.
Rock on.
Yes.
That's excellent.
Then we're also having Bill Terrell. He is an acupuncturist. So he's going to give that other alternative holistic method that, chiropractic's out there. That's pretty well known. Some people haven't dabbled in acupuncture yet. So
a lot of us hate needles, man.
Yes. They're really small. I know, right?
I can't look. I just can't. When needles are involved,
don't
I'm
jab
sorry,
yourself, but go to the acupuncturist.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm really excited to hear him talk. I've never actually had acupuncture done, but I have heard that it is wonderful. And same with cupping. I've done that a few times. But what are some of those things that don't require you going into that doctor's office that isn't really curing the issue that's going to just make you keep coming back for more?
Sure. How do we get healthy in a way that, again, works with God's design for our bodies? Especially if you're a person of faith, if you're a Christian, if you're listening to this, and you believe that God made us well, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that means that and yes, we live in a broken world where there's sickness and disease. So that wasn't the original design for the garden. We get that. And that ultimately our healing is yet to come and everything will be perfect. Praise the Lord. We're waiting for that day. But in the meantime, he still gave us a good world. He gave us a beautiful world and wonderful, bodies made in his image in many respects. So how do we work well with that? And how do we pursue health so that we can serve him well? I think these are all the assumptions that our worldview makes. And I'd love to talk, you mentioned the difference between the COVID vaccine and many of the other typical injections that we're used to, that we're more familiar with. And part of I think the wise reason of being skeptical about this, and that skepticism kind of became a touchstone for a lot of us and spiraled us off into all sorts of research and fun directions. We're just the most fun people out there in the world.
Oh, man.
We have reasons
endless
for everything.
rabbit holes.
And we read every label and we're like, nope, I'm sorry, that's a harmful ingredient.
Palm oil, no thank you.
Where's the carrots? Where's the carrots?
Yeah.
Grown from our garden. We're the cool moms now.
Yes.
Gabby Fistler is our special guest. We'll take a short break. And when we come back, we'll talk more about some of the unique things we've seen. And I would say what the data actually show. On this, because I haven't seen, we do now have studies on how the COVID jab is impacting people, has impacted people, and some of the major concerns that, lo and behold, as much as they were vilified, now turn out to be pretty prescient. Maybe people were right to be concerned. I haven't seen any good returns come out of this study so far, but again, in the interest of doing our research, we will ask the questions that no one else dare ask when we return here on FaithWorks Live. Stay tuned. In today's world, security has never been more vital. And at FaithWorks Live, we're proud to partner with VeriGuard Security. It's a professional physical security service, and they're really raising the bar in security and private investigations. Whether you need a team of professional officers to protect what you have worked hard to build, or their mobile security units for multiple properties or large locations, from business or corporate properties to your home or neighborhood. Perhaps you've got an event coming up. They secure quality security coverage for events large and small, because it's about peace of mind and protecting you, your family, your team, and your property. Settle for nothing less than the best when it comes to your security. You shouldn't have to compromise. When it comes to security, you can trust VeriGuard. Contact them today at veriguard.us. That's VARA guard.us. For security service, you can trust VeriGuard. When a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, every possible emotion goes through her head. Where can she go for help and for hope? She can go to Intervisions. Here in our metro, we have 2 healthcare clinics where she will find hope and help. From free pregnancy testing and STD testing to free ultrasounds, Intervision serves women and men with STDs who find themselves in vulnerable situations. They're completely free of charge because of generous donations from folks like you. And their medical clinics help their patients get all the information that they deserve that empowers them to make life-affirming decisions. That's what they do at Intervisions Healthcare Clinics right here in Des Moines. Learn more at intervisionshealthcare.org. That's intervisionshealthcare.org. And you can call 24 hours a day at 515-440-CARE. That's 515-440-2273. We're back. You picked a good one. This is FaithWorks Live. Rebecca's here, and Ron is here. Hey, shout out Ron Carlson, our excellent producer. And we're in studio with Gabby Fistler from Informed Choice, Iowa. I feel like I say that wrong, but it's ICI, right? Informed Choice, Iowa. And you can check out their website. There's a big conference coming up. Sign up for that. If you care about making your own health decisions and you know that you and your body and your children belong to God and not the government, sign up because it'll be your crowd. Yes. Ben Tapper's going to be there as the MC, Dr. Peter McCullough. And I'm excited because I have some questions for him. I think that he's been a real source of information through all of this. And if you, again, care about making your own decisions and you believe that people do deserve informed choice and that our government should protect that and not restrict that, then welcome. Welcome to the club. We've been talking about the changes in what's considered normal, Gabby, and what's considered typical. And I always like to say that just because something's common doesn't make it normal. Mm-hmm. Just because something is commonly done doesn't mean that it's good. As someone that's used to being the odd man out, I threw normal back on the bumper a long time ago. So normalcy is not it's just not an argument that impacts me at all. I'm cool with being weird. I'm one of those peculiar people that Peter was talking about. I'm good with that. But I think for a lot of people, when we're talking about injections and just the standard practice of medical care in general, it's something we're used to. And they would say, well, you know, I did it. My parents did that. My grandparents, all of this is, if it were a problem, then it wouldn't have been around for so long. Right. And so what's wrong? Like, it was good enough for me. I'm fine. I had all of these, you know, typical treatments. And, you know, what's wrong? What's the problem? And you were explaining that things are much, much different now. And I would say the COVID vaccine in particular, but just in general, the way that we approach medicine and injections for children has become starkly different now than ever before.
Yeah. In 1986, the Vaccine Injury Act was passed that removed that liability, and the number of jabs on that schedule just skyrocketed because there's no liability now. So back in the 60s, there was, I think, 4 shots that people got. Then in the 80s, it kind of grew to like 10, around there, a dozen. Now it is over 70 doses that our children get from their first day of life until they're 18. And they've added COVID to that now, even though the injection that they're giving is still not the one that it still has an emergency use. The one that they approved, they've never made because they know that it's just not a good shot to make.
Well, then how then do they justify something like that? If it's old, if it's ineffective, which belies the safe and effective, slogan that's out there, that's just, disregard. That's not even true.
Right.
But if this isn't even effective medication according to their own standards, then how do they justify not only recommending this for children, but essentially forcing them to do so by not informing them fully before the kid goes to school?
Yeah, I think we go back to the beginning of the conversation where it's all about the money. I mean, once it gets on there, they mass produced all of these, and, they did get a lot of people to line up at first, that fear is there. I have a shirt that says fear is a liar because it was so
Amen.
true,
Yep.
especially during that, and there were a lot of people that didn't want to lose their jobs. I know I was told I couldn't go to some family functions, so some people did that. Some people wanted to travel. There were a lot
That's a test for my prayer life. I tell you that. Like, I remember, I should be more forgiving, I suppose. I can forgive, but I do not forget.
Yeah.
And I pray for me because I'm a work in progress. But I remember the people that were so scared, and they're allowed to make their own health decisions,
Yes.
and I pray they do so with information. But the people that were so scared that they then cut off relationships with friends and family over things like this, and told our family or kids that they couldn't go to weddings, they couldn't have funerals, they couldn't have just the basic functions of life, and the human experience basically had to stop because we might get sick or something, and that you weren't loving. There was religious undertones for a lot of people. You weren't loving your neighbor if you
Yeah.
didn't wear a mask
You were
and
gonna
get a
kill
jab.
grandma.
You were going to kill. Yes, exactly. Literally that. You were going to kill grandma. And now more and more, there were still people that resisted. And every time this topic comes up, I say, I did not comply. I do not regret. Over
hands
and
down.
over again. And for everyone that faced that decision and still said no, for everyone who said, I would rather lose my job, I'm okay. I'm going to trust God. I'm going to wash my hands. I'm going to trust God. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to do what's best. I'm going to give my kids vitamin D. I'm going to give them sunshine. I'm not going to be afraid of fresh air. It's going to be all right. And that's not to say that there wasn't loss of life and that this didn't impact many families the way that any sickness would. But that is to say that you can't cut off family members for choosing different medical practices for their own health, because that's ultimately their decision. And that's hard to reconcile, I think, for a lot of people. And maybe you've had a different experience, Gabby, but for a lot of people, folks don't want to talk about this anymore.
No, it's not impacting my life. It's done. It's over with. Why are you still saying the C word?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except we're now still being told
Well, now
that
it's the
COVID
M.
vaccine,
Now it's the M word,
right? Well,
and the bird flu,
right? And we see new kind of
Yes.
waves of pandemic
Yes.
come up and over again. And I saw just the other day there was another mainstream grocery store peddling COVID-19 vaccines coming back around. Get your flu shot. Okay, so now it's just normal, right? Because it was the end of the world. It was literally the end of the world and life and
normalized
society, and
it.
you have to put the brakes on every human activity. You can't have a business. You can't send kids to school. It's the end of the world. And now it's just it's COVID season again.
yeah,
just
they've
get your
normalized it
shot.
like the
And
flu.
How these extremities? I got whiplash from that, Gabby. I don't understand it, but they're still selling. I guess back to the
Yes.
original point. Thanks for following me on that grand tour.
Yeah.
The original point is, what do we know now about some of this medication? Because it was pushed out to everybody. Fear was a big motivator. Again, understandable. Tons of grace for that. We didn't know what we didn't know.
Yep.
But now we've had time and years now to study. It was untested largely. Right?
Oh, very much so.
Essentially untested. We did a mass population level experiment by mandating a lot, or all but mandating, threatening people to get these COVID vaccines. And many people did. And then we were told, well, it's not completely as effective. Oopsies. It's not as effective as we thought it was. So you got to get some more boosters. You got to get another version of this. And there are still people, I'm sure, that believe in that. But now we do have some more data. And what do those data show? What do the studies show about what this concoction of chemicals is doing in our bodies?
Oh, well, that was a lot. But I think kind of going back to the first part of how can they justify giving these to kids?
Sure.
Is
You can respond to any part of any answer. It's kind of like a presidential debate at this point. Like, you just pick and choose. Design your own question. Choose your own adventure. What would you like to talk about? I got on a roll. I am not done talking about this, and it seems like everyone else is. We're like, finally, we get to have this
someone
out.
that wants to have this conversation with me.
But yeah, so how do they justify?
Yeah, well, they have a huge supply. And again, this is my personal opinion. And people didn't want, I was told 2 doses and we're good. We took the 2 weeks off. We got our 2 doses. I should be good. Well, now you need a booster. Oh, but now you need another booster and you need another booster. And it was like 99% effective. Like, have you seen the compilation of different videos that they have put together where it shows all these news people saying 80% effective, 50% effective, 40% effective? I don't even know if there's any efficacy to it all. And I have heard that you're more likely to get sick if you get the shot. And the difference between the rollout of COVID versus the childhood schedule is they did it on such a global level that they can't hide the side effects like they try to hide in our children, because it's just that age group getting it. The amount of cases of SIDS went down during COVID because people weren't taking their children to the doctor for their regular checkups.
Yeah.
And now that you have this influx of this entire population getting the COVID jab, they've now tried to normalize sudden death. You see athletes that are dropping, kids that are dropping. Myocarditis was not a word I knew until COVID hit.
Right.
And so I don't know the specific data around it. I know Peter McCullough can speak for hours on that because he has studied it so much. But, just if you know someone that got it, like I was talking to a friend recently and he made that same comment. He's like, why are you talking about COVID? Like, it's over. Like, I got the 1 J&J. I realized that, I can still live with life. Things open back up. He goes, but I'm on 3 prescriptions now.
And you weren't before.
And he wasn't before. No heart issues prior to that. And so when you start to dig down that rabbit hole, you now see the same companies that had the jab now have medications for myocarditis, and they have medications for the other side
What a
effects that
coincidence.
there are. I know, ironic how they just have these ready to go.
Don't you think?
So again, if all of this just goes back to pausing, researching, and just being observant of what's happening around you. When I was growing up, I graduated in 2005. There was one child in our school that had autism. My mom didn't even know what it was. And there's not better testing. Like, when you hear people say, well, we have to keep doing the polio shot because we don't want polio to come back. Well, there's some graphs out there that show the level of deaths, and they are all about ready to bottom out. And then the jab was introduced. So the jab didn't save everything. We had clean water. We had better sanitation. You're aware of how illness is spread. And so it's not the jab isn't the be all save all.
Yeah, but that made me think of something as you were saying that there's a whole host of factors that are involved in any of these things. And what makes me suspicious, especially for people who are just pushing this on others instead of the ones saying, well, you're free to make your own choices and we can choose differently. And I can respect, if you choose differently, then that's fine. That's not, to me, a salvation issue. Like, I will still be your brother and sister, and I will treat you with love and kindness, and yes, we can all just get along. But there are forces that are literally shoving people into one particular pathway, and they say this is the only choice you're allowed to make, and then they're silencing all the voices of critics or of even just plain alternatives. The fact that they targeted like chiropractors, or that they fired good qualified nurses and doctors and medical professionals who wouldn't go along with this one path, or who had any questions about it, that weren't fans of the mandates. Like, really, at a time when you're afraid our healthcare system is going to be overrun with pandemic population level crisis, you're firing a quarter. Was it a quarter or a third?
Oh,
it was
so
a huge
many.
number.
Yes. Yes.
of qualified medical professionals because they disagree with you, because they dare to think for themselves and they're asking questions. Why is it that we are not giving people vitamin D as a matter of course? For example, I've been doing some research into different vitamins and deficiencies, and vitamin D is incredibly cheap. It's also like there's no side effects whatsoever. And Dr. John, if I can find that video, I'll link it down below. And he does fascinating work in general. Much a big hat tip. So I learned a lot from him. But he's always very careful in what he says and what he doesn't say. But one recent video, which is the one I'll link down below if you can find it, just to make it easy for you, was the concern over one study that elderly people who were given 4 or more COVID vaccines / boosters, essentially that correlated with death for them. Like the more of these chemicals that they were injected with, that the correlation was so strong, and these were like population level studies for different countries, as, when they have like statewide healthcare, state mandated healthcare. There's some downsides to that, but there's also the benefit of all the data that is now prevalent, and it essentially there was a provable correlation between number of jabs in this case and side effects leading to death. It was just inescapable.
Well, Del Bigtree and his nonprofit ICANN actually sued I think Pfizer to get their studies, and they've published them, and they've showed that even during those safety trials there was injuries, and they cut the trial short. So if you were a placebo group, they gave it to you before because they thought it was it was unethical to continue to allow the placebo group to not have the actual jab to protect themselves.
Which invalidates the study then, doesn't it? Right?
100%. You have no long-term study now. Like,
this thing that we were studying, we can't do it anymore.
I am proud to be a part of the control group.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's just so many different things with that the data is coming out now. I think Governor Cuomo had to go to Congress. I haven't had a chance to listen to that, but I just saw a headline that, they falsified data of all of those nursing home deaths during COVID.
Yeah.
And more is continuing to come out.
And if something is so good that they have to mandate it, like it just makes you think. That's always been my big thing about the whole big government stuff. So like idea is so good that you have to mandate it because people won't choose it on their own. Like, okay.
Well, and going back to the thing you said about the one path they want you to take, that isn't even like a state thing or a nation thing. Like it is a global thing. Like the World Health Organization is wanting to control it all. Like they were going to meet and during their annual meeting, do a treaty that said we get to determine as a world organization what you as a sovereign country and sovereign state will do if there's another pandemic. And it's like, wait a second, like so our Constitution just gets thrown out? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, last I checked, there wasn't a little codicil in there that said void in case of pandemic, or like except if the government really wants to control things, because the government knows best. Actually, strike that, reverse it. We are the government in our nation. We, the people, get to determine these things, and I don't understand how you can believe that. How you can assent to that and swear to defend that if you're an elected official, and then also say, yeah, except when we know better than you, except when it's a life or death, when we've determined that this is the time that we get to take control. Like, pretty sure King George III wishes he could have done that. Just been like, void, null and void, because I'm in control. Like, no, this is why revolutions are fought and won in our case. And I think we have to take a long, hard look at what we're actually responsible for, at who we are, at who we're going to be. And I don't think you need to ask for permission to live freely. I think that's how God designed us, and that's the foundation of who we are as Americans. That is the American spirit. But I also think that same right belongs to anyone of any country. It's just we've codified it and recognized it for so many years that it's laughable on its face to me if you believe in that. However, if you believe, and this is where I get a little theological up in here, and that is if you believe that God made you as a as an individual, male, female, alike in dignity, in his image, then all of this seems natural. All that naturally flows from that. We have the respect of family. We have the parental order, mothers, fathers, children, and that they're all being raised in the nurture and admonition of the Lord to serve him. That's what that we organize ourselves in societies to respect and honor those in authority who are meant to reward good and to punish evil. That's Romans 13. So all of that makes perfect sense. All of that's good for society, objectively. But the problem is when government ignores God, when government rejects God, government becomes God. And again, isn't it ironic now that we're not allowed to make decisions for ourselves or to think for ourselves or to do our own research, that government is controlling information in this country more than ever before, that we're told that we're only allowed to make the one decision that they determine for us, and if we choose against that they now have control over our own bodies.
Only the jabs will save you.
And that's not who I trust in.
Yeah.
It's just not. And so that sets God's people apart, I think. Hopefully we're not suffering from the same confusion as others, but fear is a very powerful motivator. It is, and we have to reject it exactly as you said. That's a tool of the enemy. That's not the truth. God doesn't deal in fear, and he gave us not the spirit of fear, but of love and of peace, of a sound mind, of self-discipline. We have all of those things. The fruit of the Spirit is not fear. Essentially, we just fear the Lord, and then we don't have to fear anybody else. We don't, everything else, it pales in comparison. What can man do to me? That's sort of my operating modus operandi. But I think there's a lot of people that are out there concerned about the push that you mentioned. I'm not afraid to be the resistance. I just that's what we're called to, I think, in many respects, just by living our lives, by doing the free, loving our neighbor, loving ourselves, and saying no to a crazy tyrannical government. That's just what I'm called to do. I'm good with that. We can have fun along the way.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that are afraid of that. And I hear that even from, folks in my side, good, God-loving people. And they're like, well, what about all these global forces that are out there that are trying to take control? Or what happens if this person gets elected instead of this person? And I hear that. I absolutely understand and hear that. I do not think, though, that we have any reason ultimately to be afraid from an eternal perspective. And I think we have to take hold of the freedoms that are currently ours. We just have to, you don't need anyone else's permission to live free. God gave you that.
Yep.
So just live that way.
Fear not.
And fear not. And so I wonder if we can maybe wrap up our time today by talking about ways that we can exercise that freedom and just encourage people. I think you've equipped us with a lot of good information. And we'll maybe say one more about the conference as well. But let's just encourage people to not fear. How can we be empowered with more information? Maybe a good place to start.
Well, personally, I like to go to church and get in nature.
Sure. Yep.
That is my go-to. I enjoy hiking and not wearing the earbuds that are putting Wi-Fi radiation through your brain when you wear them. Wear corded headphones, everyone. But just actually being out in where God made is it brings you back to being able to take that pause and realize what actually does impact my day to day. And when you start to go through these different rabbit holes, it becomes very easy to be overwhelmed with looking at what's in our injections, what is in our food, the lack of nutrition in our food, what is in our water, what are they spraying in the air, what are the chemicals they're spraying on our fields. There's so many different things once you start, chickens are the gateway drug to homesteading, but looking into jabs is the gateway drug to everything else. And it's very easy to just start to be consumed by knowledge. And then you just get stuck constantly looking for more and more and more. It's good to be educated, but you can't let it overtake life.
Yeah. Well, and knowledge is meant to empower, I think, and to equip us. But I've had those moments, and I've seen people go into those places where they start essentially the doom scroll, where you're just like, well, if it's this, then it's something else, and it's something else. And suddenly you're like, well, the moon landing was fake. And we're like, this is a flat earth all the time, isn't it? I can't even trust my own eyes anymore. And I mean, no offense to anybody that's out there who's just like, okay, that there have to be limits, there have to be boundaries. And for me, I have to go back to the Word of God.
Yep.
And I have to spend more time talking with God and learning from God than I am, researching all the terrible things that men want to do to us. Yes, it's right to be equipped to understand that with knowledge, but we have to then say, okay, what am I in control of?
Yep.
What can I do for myself, for my family? Yes, I can be empowered to make some of those decisions. And that's why I think I appreciate the approach of this conference, which isn't just to, give you the facts, which may feel doom and gloom or may feel like, oh, this is bigger than, the shadow masters are at it again. I'm like, that doesn't surprise me. But what I do need to do is be equipped with information and alternatives.
Yep.
God's people should be the alternative. It's not just that the world around us is dark and sinful and broken and lost and desperate. All of that is true. But God sent the light. He didn't allow us to stay here in the darkness. He is the light. He sent the light to us. And the more that we understand that, when we walk in that light as he is in the light, then we are cleansed, we are washed, we are whole, we can have hope, we can have life abundant. That is who God's people are. That is who we are meant to be. And to the extent that we can get into that darkness and seek to expose it.
Yep.
That's the point. Ephesians 5:11. It's like we don't hold fellowship with the darkness. We get into it in order to expose it and then allow the light to cleanse, allow the light to awaken, allow the light to bring us into the wholeness and healing that God always meant for his people to have, and towards that life abundant. So that's what I hope we did here today.
Yeah, and that's, building informed communities is what the theme of our conference is. And I think the best way to kind of get out of that doom and gloom is to surround yourself with the people that are informed, that, have a strong faith, that know that I'm trusting the intuition that God gave me. I'm discerning on what is best for my family, and I'm not just following what someone on TV or in a doctor's office or, even what a good friend says, because, you can get information from podcasts or anywhere, but you need to know what's best for your family to continue to walk in that light.
Absolutely. Gabby, it's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Gabby from Informed Choice, Iowa. Click the links down below. If you can get to the conference, it's going to be a fun time. It's just going to be, I can tell it will be an empowering and equipping time, which is really what we want. I call it an armor up kind of discussion. So we go armored up, and the battle does belong to the Lord. So we don't walk in fear, but we should walk in knowledge and in wisdom, and then make informed choices from there. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching, for listening. Thank you, Ron, for recording and making us sound good. And until next time, I was going to say, if you have comments, questions, objections, criticisms, any of the above, compliments, there might be a random compliment out there. I'll take it. Sure. I'm a mom. I can take all the encouragement I can get. And until next time, we have a mission, which is to love God, to serve people, and to live free.